Welcome, dear friend, as we continue this quiet journey together. Tonight, we gently walk into ancient teachings and softly guarded insights that Buddhist masters have carried through countless generations, not to impress the mind, but to calm it, to ease it into deep and natural peace. Wherever you are, whatever hour has found you listening, you are welcome here. In this space, there is nothing you need to prove and nowhere you need to go. I will share with you a series of nearly forgotten Zen stories, each one holding an old key, simple in form, yet powerful in spirit. These stories speak not to logic alone, but to the deeper layers of the heart. Each teaching has the potential to subtly change how you relate to tension, restless thoughts, and that quiet feeling of always needing something more. Though they may seem modest on the surface, their wisdom has been preserved by minds that understood a truth many have lost along the way. Peace does not come from rearranging the outer world, but from gently realigning the inner one. As the Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once reminded us, peace is not distant or hidden. It is present here and now, in ourselves and in every step, every breath, every moment. The only question is whether we are truly touching it. As we move through these stories together, you may notice a shift unfolding on its own. Worry may begin to loosen its grip. The constant inner dialogue may soften, slowing into long pauses of quiet. Without effort, your body may begin to rest more deeply, your mind settling like silt in clear water. So allow yourself to settle now. Let your body be fully supported. Take one gentle, conscious breath with me. And as you release it, know that the wisdom you are about to receive has been patiently waiting for you, just as you are. Let us begin with a story of beauty and imperfection. Near a small, hidden monastery stood an old pine tree, twisted and weathered by time. Its trunk bent into strange knots, its branches reached out in uneven, awkward ways, and it cast very little shade. For many years, the younger monks complained about it. It is useless, one would say. No straight wood can be taken from it. Another would add, it is unpleasant to look at, wasting good earth. We should remove it and plant tall, straight cedars that will serve the monastery better. The old abbot often sat quietly beside the tree. He listened and he smiled, but he said nothing. One day, a young monk eager to improve the monastery came forward with a careful argument. He spoke of the tree's flaws, its crooked shape, its lack of usefulness, its rough and uneven form. It has no purpose, master, the monk concluded. It is a flaw in an otherwise harmonious garden. The abbot invited the monk to sit beside him beneath the tree. Gently, he pointed to a hollow where the trunk bent inward. "Do you see that space?" he asked. "That is where the field mouse hides from the hawk." He gestured toward a low, curved branch. "That branch is the only place the old cat can climb to warm himself in the afternoon sun." He ran his hand along. The thick, rugged bark. Within this bark live countless mosses and insects, a small world that depends on this tree alone. The abbot paused, resting his palm against the trunk. Because it is seen as useless, no woodcutter has struck it. Because it does not match the world's idea of perfection, storms have spared its humble branches. It has been allowed to live quietly, freely, and fully. In doing so, it has become a refuge for all things that are crooked, overlooked, or gentle. Its purpose is simply to be, and in its being it offers shelter. "Do not be so quick," the abbot said softly, "to judge what is bent in the world or within yourself. Sometimes the deepest peace lives in places that have never been straightened. The Buddha taught that three things cannot remain hidden for long: the sun, the moon, and the truth. The truth revealed by this twisted pine is one our modern world longs to remember. It invites us to see value differently, to recognize that usefulness is not the only measure of worth. Why is it so easy to dismiss what appears imperfect? Our world has grown fixated on efficiency, performance, and constant improvement. We measure, compare, optimize, and refine. While this approach has its place, it becomes harmful when applied to the soul. It gives rise to a relentless inner voice that labels difference as failure, uniqueness as weakness, and authenticity as something lacking. Notice how this shows up in your own life. How often do you criticize yourself for not being more productive, more confident, more disciplined, or more polished? How often do you look at your sensitivity, your slowness, your need for quiet, and decide something is wrong with you? The twisted pine reflects those parts of us we have learned to reject. Our tenderness in a hard world, our calm nature in a hurried culture, our longing for solitude in a noisy society. Zen Buddhism speaks of wabi-sabi, the gentle beauty found in imperfection, impermanence, and incompleteness. A cracked bowl, weathered wood, an uneven handmade vessel, all carry a depth that flawless surfaces cannot hold. Their marks tell stories. Their flaws reveal life. And as you rest with this understanding, allow yourself to soften. There is nothing about you that needs to be fixed in this moment. Simply being is enough. In Zen practice, we gently cultivate what is called beginner's mind, meeting each moment as if for the first time, without placing rigid judgments on how things should be. With this soft attention, we begin to see beyond old labels of useful and useless, beautiful and ugly, worthy and unworthy. Slowly, a deeper vision opens. We start to notice the subtle ecosystem that exists around, and within, everything once dismissed as a flaw. An ancient Chinese sage once told a story of a carpenter who passed by a vast, twisted tree. His apprentice asked why the master did not stop to admire it. The carpenter replied calmly, "That tree is worthless. Make a boat from it and it will sink. Make a coffin and it will rot. Make furniture and it will break. That is why it still stands here, ancient and magnificent." Just like the monastery's pine, the tree's apparent uselessness became its protection and also its gift. This wisdom reaches far beyond self-acceptance. It touches the way we see others. How often do we dismiss the quiet one as distant, the unconventional thinker as troublesome, or the sensitive soul as weak? In our haste to classify and optimize, we overlook the hidden gifts, the quiet contributions, the shelter these seemingly imperfect beings offer to the world. Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki once said, "You are perfect just as you are, and you could use a little improvement." Within this gentle paradox lies the secret of true growth. We can refine ourselves without rejecting ourselves. We can grow while honoring what already exists. We can smooth our rough edges without cutting away our true nature. Tonight, as you notice the parts of yourself you usually criticize, your tendency to delay, your habit of overthinking, your emotional depth, can you pause and look for the hidden ecosystem they support? Perhaps your delay allows space for deeper insight. Perhaps your thinking protects you from careless choices. Perhaps your emotional intensity creates refuge for others who feel deeply in a shallow world. The Buddha taught that if you truly loved yourself, you would never harm yourself with angry thoughts. The twisted pine reminds us that self-love includes our bent branches, our rugged bark, our uncommon form. When we accept our imperfections, we often discover they were never flaws at all, but quiet expressions of grace, making shelter possible for ourselves and for others. Our next story invites us into the practice of patient attention. In a village famous for its exquisite silk tapestries, there lived a young woman known simply as the weaver's daughter. Her family created breathtaking scenes of dragons, mountains, and emperors. Yet the daughter never sat at a loom. Instead, she spent her days in a quiet corner of the workshop with a massive tangle of discarded silk threads. It was a chaotic bundle of knots and snarls, colors hopelessly intertwined. Each day, she placed the tangled silk on her lap. She did not pull or force it. She simply sat, breathing gently, and searched for a single loose end. With endless patience, she followed that one thread, easing it free with fingers that moved as slowly as drifting clouds. Sometimes, freeing just one thread took an entire day. When she succeeded, she wound it carefully onto a small wooden spool. The villagers whispered. "She is foolish," they said, "wasting her life on scraps. She will never weave a masterpiece." Even her family grew sorrowful, believing her talent lost in meaningless labor. One day, a traveling Zen master stopped at the workshop. His robes were dusty from the road. He admired the tapestries, watching the weaver's hands fly, their faces tight with effort. Then he noticed the weaver's daughter in her corner, her face calm as she slowly freed a single crimson thread. He watched her quietly for a long time. He saw the great mountain of tangles, and beside her, the small, orderly spools of rescued silk. The master approached her, not the skilled weavers, and bowed deeply. "I have seen countless tapestries of beauty," he said softly, "but here I see the weaving of the mind itself. Others rush to create images for the world to admire. You are untangling the knots of existence, finding peace not in the finished picture, but in the gentle freedom of each thread. Please teach me your art." The Buddha once said, "Patience is not about waiting. It is about how we behave while we wait." This teaching illuminates the heart of the weaver's daughter's practice. What she mastered was not silk, but the mind, cultivating presence, patience, and quiet persistence amid complexity. Why is patience so difficult for us today? We live in a culture of immediacy, trained to expect quick results and instant change. We want calm at once, healing overnight, growth on demand. Like the villagers watching the weaver's daughter, we often mistake slow, careful work for wasted effort. Zen Buddhism teaches that the mind itself is like that tangled mound of silk. Thoughts, memories, emotions, and habits are knotted together in ways that cannot be forced apart. When we pull impatiently, trying to hurry change, we only tighten the knots and deepen our suffering. The weaver's daughter shows another way, mindful untangling. This begins by sitting with complexity without rushing to fix it. Imagine spending an entire day with just one thread of anger, one strand of grief, one filament of fear. Most of us would rather create something impressive than do this quiet, unseen work. This wisdom applies to healing old wounds, changing habits, and navigating difficult relationships. Such things do not yield to pressure or urgency. They require the weaver's touch, gentle, sustained attention that respects the fragility of the process. Each small release creates space for the next. Each freed thread adds to clarity. Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught that the present moment is the only moment available to us, and it is the doorway to all others. The weaver's daughter understood this deeply. She was not chasing a future where all threads were free. She found fulfillment in this one thread, in this one moment. This practice also shapes how we support others. Instead of rushing to advise or repair, we can sit patiently with their complexity. Sometimes the greatest gift is simply bearing witness as someone untangles their own knots, without judgment or deadline. The master saw what others missed. The weaver's daughter had discovered awakening not through grand creations, but through wholehearted presence. Her peace arose not from completion, but from the quality of attention she brought to each breath of work. Zen teacher Charlotte Joko Beck once said, "Practice is not about getting somewhere else. It is about being where you are and knowing it." The weaver's daughter knew exactly where she was, with one thread, one breath, one moment of gentle patience. Now, consider the tangled places in your own life. Perhaps it is a difficult relationship, a pattern of self-criticism, or uncertainty about your path. What would it mean to meet these tangles as the weaver's daughter did, to search for just one loose end and begin there? To trust that slow, mindful care is stronger than force? The Buddha taught that a jug fills drop by drop. Healing, growth, and understanding arise the same way, through countless small moments of patient attention. Tonight, when something complex appears in your mind, can you resist the urge to solve it quickly? Can you choose instead one breath, one sensation, one thought, and hold it gently, knowing it matters? The Buddha also taught that nothing harms us more than unguarded thoughts, and nothing helps us more than thoughts held with care. The art of untangling teaches us to guard the mind not through control, but through loving attention that frees each thread in time. Now, let us continue our journey with a story of transformation, of how what haunts us may also guide us. There once lived a young monk named Kenji who was deeply troubled. He believed a ghost followed him, the soft, sorrowful presence of a man he had wronged in his youth before entering the monastery. The spirit was not terrifying, but its grief weighed heavily on his heart. It clouded his meditation and dulled the taste of his meals. Desperate for relief, Kenji went to the head monk, a wise and grounded teacher named Jiro. "Master," Kenji cried, "I am haunted. A spirit follows me and will not let me rest. Please perform a ritual. Drive it away with chants and sutras." Master Jiro looked at him calmly and said nothing. "An exorcism is a battle," the master said softly, "and every battle only gives a ghost more strength. From this moment on, you will no longer fight it. You will care for it. When you are served your meal, you will take 2 bowls, one for yourself and one for the ghost. You will place its bowl before an empty cushion and say, 'This is your share. Please eat.' When you prepare for sleep, you will lay out 2 mats and say, 'This is your place to rest.' In all things, you will acknowledge your guest and provide for it." Kenji was confused, his mind full of doubt. Yet his exhaustion was deeper than his questioning. That evening, he carried 2 bowls of rice to his room. He set one before the empty cushion across from him. "This is your share," he whispered into the quiet air. As he did, a deep sadness rose within his chest. For the first time, he did not push it away. He did not distract himself or turn from it. He sat with it. He served it. He continued this practice day after day. He poured tea for the ghost. He prepared a resting place. He spoke softly of small things, the weather, the passing of time. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to change. The sense of being haunted softened into a feeling of carrying an old, quiet sorrow. The ghost was no longer an intruder. It had become a companion. One evening, as Kenji placed the bowl of rice on the cushion, he paused. He looked at the empty space and, for the first time, asked a question. What is it that you truly need? In the stillness of his own mind, an answer arose, clear, gentle, and sounding very much like his own voice. I need to be forgiven. Kenji remained motionless as tears flowed freely down his face. He brought his palms together and bowed deeply, to the empty cushion, to the ghost, to himself. I forgive you, he whispered. I forgive myself. From that day on, he no longer set out 2 bowls. He sat alone, yet he was no longer haunted. The Buddha taught that hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal law. At the heart of this story is a simple truth. What we resist continues, but what we meet with compassion can transform. Kenji's ghost represents the parts of ourselves we try to exile: guilt, shame, regret, and the shadowed aspects we would rather not see. Why do we instinctively want to fight these inner figures? Much of our world teaches us to solve problems through opposition, through conquering, erasing, or defeating. We declare wars on our habits, battle our sadness, and try to crush unwanted thoughts. Yet when this combative energy is turned inward, it often deepens our suffering. The effort to destroy our inner shadows can give them more power. Zen offers another way, not indulgence, not denial, but befriending what troubles us. To care for our ghosts does not mean excusing harmful actions or clinging to pain. It means recognizing that these experiences are part of our human wholeness and deserve gentle attention rather than violent rejection. Consider how this applies to your own life. When anxiety arises, the struggle to eliminate it often makes it louder. When sadness appears, fighting it can deepen despair. When regret lingers, trying to forget it may keep it alive. Master Jiro's teaching points us toward a different path. Tend to what haunts you. This may mean setting aside a few quiet moments each day to acknowledge your fear instead of escaping it. It may mean writing words of apology or forgiveness you never send. It may mean allowing difficult emotions to exist in meditation, rather than using practice as a way to flee. A Zen master once said, "Only go straight." The straight path is not around our ghosts, but through them. When Kenji stopped trying to banish his haunting and instead offered it care, he shifted from resistance to relationship. This movement, from fighting to feeding, is one of the most subtle and powerful transformations available to us. Notice that the ghost did not need to be destroyed. It needed to be heard, recognized, and forgiven. Our inner shadows often carry messages about our wounds, our values, and the parts of ourselves waiting to be integrated. When we listen with patience instead of force, these parts often reveal what they truly need. This work takes courage. It is easier to judge ourselves harshly or to hide behind spiritual ideas than to sit quietly with our mistakes. Yet this gentle approach can heal what years of self-criticism could not. Caring for our ghosts with kindness begins to change the relationship itself. A Buddhist teacher once wrote that the greatest harm we do to ourselves is refusing to look at ourselves honestly and gently. Kenji's path shows this courage in action. By treating his ghost as a guest, he created space for understanding and healing. Many of our ghosts are simply pieces of ourselves asking to come home. When Kenji heard his own voice answer from the silence, he understood that the haunting was his own unfinished conversation. The forgiveness he offered outwardly was the forgiveness he had long withheld from himself. Tonight, as you notice what follows you, old memories, lingering shame, restless thoughts, consider this gentle prescription. Instead of battling what appears, what would it be like to set a place for it? To listen quietly for what it truly needs? The Buddha taught that to understand your past, look at your present condition. To understand your future, look at your present actions. When we care for our ghosts with compassion in this moment, we reshape both our past and our path ahead. Sometimes those who feel most haunted become the greatest sources of healing, because they have learned to befriend what others still fight. Now, let us turn to a story about the quiet strength of patience. A wealthy patron once commissioned the monastery to create a contemplation stone for a new silent garden. It was to be, he said, as smooth as still water and as flawless as the open sky. The task was given to an elderly monk named Ryokan, who had once been a stone carver before taking his vows. The patron delivered a massive block of rough gray granite, sharp-edged and uneven. The other monks expected to hear the steady strike of hammer and chisel for many months. But Ryokan did not lift a tool. He had the stone moved to a secluded hut and sat beside it each day. For the first month, he did nothing but sit. He walked around the stone, touched its surface, felt its roughness beneath his palms. Then he began his work. He dipped his hand into a bucket of water and gently rubbed a small area of the stone. He rubbed for hours, his movements slow and steady. There was no loud sound, only the soft whisper of skin against wet stone. He was not cutting it down. He was polishing it with the patient friction of his own hand. His disciples grew restless. "Master," they said, "at this pace it will take a lifetime. Let us help you. We can remove the large pieces and finish more quickly." Ryokan shook his head. "To strike the stone is to wound it," he replied. "Its smoothness would be born of scars. To polish it is to know it. I am not removing what is wrong. I am revealing what is already beautiful." He continued for more than a year. Only the quiet sound of hand on stone filled the hut. At last, he announced the work was complete. When the monks and the patron came to see, they stood in silence. The stone was not merely smooth. It seemed to glow from within, like moonlight made solid. Astonished, the patron asked, "How did you achieve such perfection without tools?" Ryokan raised his right hand. His palm was covered in a smooth, thick callus, polished like the stone itself. "The world believes peace is made by chipping away what we dislike," he said. "But true peace is shaped by gentle, patient, loving contact." The stone did not change my hand any less than my hand changed the stone. The Buddha taught that a vessel is filled drop by drop, and so too does one gather goodness little by little. Here we see a deeply misunderstood truth. Lasting transformation arises through gentle consistency, not force. Our world celebrates sudden breakthroughs and dramatic change. We want quick results and immediate relief. In doing so, we often take hammers to the delicate work of becoming whole. Notice how this appears in your own efforts. When you seek patience, do you expect instant calm? When you tend relationships, Do you try to resolve years of tension all at once? When you meditate, do you aim too high and then abandon the practice? Ryokan's way offers another path. He understood that true change requires relationship, not domination. By sitting with the stone, touching it, learning it, he developed intimacy with the work. This patient observation is essential to any deep change. The gentle movement of hand and water reflects the smallest effective effort. In practice, this may be a few quiet minutes each day, one honest conversation a week, one mindful step at a time. Ryokan also showed that the one who changes is always changed in return. When we grow through gentle persistence, we cultivate patience, humility, and steadiness, qualities as valuable as any goal. A Zen teacher once wrote that practice and awakening are not separate. Ryokan lived this truth. He was not polishing the stone to reach some future peace. The polishing itself was the peace. And as you rest now, breathing softly, allow this understanding to settle. There is no need to force your way into stillness. Like the stone, like the ghost, like the tangled threads, peace reveals itself through quiet, patient care. Each slow, circular movement of his hand was complete in itself, yet it also served the greater transformation. This way of working asks us to change how we understand progress. In a world that measures success by visible results, we often overlook the quiet power of small, daily actions. And yet, these gentle, repeated moments of intention, like water slowly shaping stone, create changes that force and urgency can never bring. The smoothness born from patient polishing carries a kind of integrity that quick solutions do not. Consider the places in your own life where you may have been using hammers and chisels. Perhaps you have been harsh with yourself about old habits, trying to drive them away with criticism and sheer will. Perhaps you have felt impatient in your meditation, disappointed when insight does not arrive on your timetable. Imagine what Ryokan's way might look like in these moments. A Tibetan teacher once spoke of basic goodness, the innate wisdom and compassion present in every being. Ryokan's words, "I am not removing what is wrong with the stone. I am revealing what is already beautiful within it," echo this truth. Real transformation is not about fixing ourselves, but about gently polishing away what hides our true nature. Notice that when the stone was finished, it did more than feel smooth. It seemed to glow from within. This radiance was not added, it was uncovered. In the same way, when we meet ourselves and others with steady gentleness, what emerges often carries a quiet light that force can never produce. Tonight, as you reflect on the changes you wish to make, remember the soft whisper of skin against stone. What would it be like to approach your growth with such kindness? To trust that small, daily acts of loving attention can accomplish what pressure cannot? To understand that the hand doing the polishing is changed just as deeply as the stone itself? The Buddha taught that better than 1,000 empty words is one word that brings peace. Sometimes that word is not spoken. Sometimes it is the silent conversation between water, hand, and stone, the quiet dialogue of care that slowly reveals the hidden light within. Our final story leads us into the wisdom found in darkness. In the main hall of a mountain monastery, a single oil lantern was kept burning through every night. It was an ancient custom. The responsibility for tending the flame, refilling the oil, trimming the wick, was given to the youngest acolyte, a boy named Taka. Taka was careful and devoted, but his mind was restless. He became troubled by the shadows the lantern cast. A pillar's shadow stretched across the wall like a twisted creature. The shadow of the Buddha statue flickered and shifted, never still. Night after night, Taka tried to correct them. He moved cushions, trimmed the wick, tilted the lantern, yet every adjustment only created new and stranger shadows. His nights became a quiet torment, his mind locked in endless correction. One evening, the old master entered the hall and found Taka on his knees, desperately repositioning a vase whose shadow disturbed him. "Taka," the master said gently, "your mind is very busy." "The shadows, master," Taka replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I cannot make them right. They are always changing. They disturb the peace of this hall." The master looked at the flame and at the dancing shapes along the walls. Then, with one calm breath, he stepped forward and softly blew out the lantern. The hall fell into deep, complete darkness. Taka froze. After a moment, the master's voice came from the blackness. "Taka," he asked quietly, "where are the shadows now?" Taka listened. There were no shapes, no distortions, nothing to correct. Only stillness. "They are gone, master," he said at last. "So tell me," the master continued, his voice steady in the dark, "is it the nature of light to create shadows, or the nature of the mind to fixate on them? Perhaps the peace you seek is not found by perfecting the light, but by resting where such problems do not exist." Ancient Buddhist wisdom tells us that things are simply as they are, whether we understand them or not. This story reveals the futility of trying to perfect what cannot be perfected, and the peace that arises when we stop trying to control what is beyond us. Taka's struggle mirrors a common form of suffering today. The belief that inner peace depends on arranging outer conditions just right. We exhaust ourselves trying to manage circumstances, opinions, outcomes, and uncertainties, convinced that one final adjustment will bring rest. Why does the mind cling so tightly to control? Zen teaches that we mistake external order for inner safety. We seek security by shaping the world, rather than by cultivating equanimity within it. Even spiritual practice can become another tool for control, rather than a path of surrender. Notice how this appears in daily life. We rewrite messages endlessly to avoid misunderstanding. We manage our image to escape judgment. We organize, optimize, and adjust, hoping to eliminate discomfort, only to create new shadows. The master's act of extinguishing the flame points to a deeper truth. Sometimes peace does not come from solving problems, but from questioning whether they need to be solved at all. In darkness, the shadows that once troubled us simply disappear. This is not indifference, but wisdom, the ability to distinguish between what requires action and what is only a product of resistance. Shadows are not enemies of light, they arise naturally with it. In the same way, uncertainty is not the enemy of peace. Our struggle with uncertainty is. A Zen master once said that because of impermanence, everything is possible. The flickering shadows were expressions of constant change. When we fight this movement, we suffer. When we allow it, we become free. By removing the flame, the master taught without explanation. Sometimes the most helpful response is not a better technique, but a step outside the problem itself. For us, this may mean stepping away from constant news, releasing our grip on social comparison, or sitting in meditation without seeking any particular experience, resting in not knowing. In the darkness of the hall, Taka could finally hear what had always been there. the quiet presence beneath his effort. Peace was not the absence of shadows, but the absence of struggle with them. Tonight, as you notice your own mind trying to fix, adjust, or control what cannot be controlled, remember Taka and the lantern. What flames might you gently allow to go out? What would it feel like to rest in the darkness where nothing needs to be corrected? The Buddha taught that peace comes from within and cannot be found elsewhere. Sometimes the most radical act is to stop seeking and to rest in the vast, gentle darkness of acceptance, where the shadows of resistance fade, and what remains is the deep peace that has always been present. Now, let us turn to a story about the difference between knowledge and lived wisdom, the story of following the stream. Deep in a vast wilderness, where tall pines reached toward an open sky, two city travelers found themselves lost. What began as a simple hike had turned into a day and a night of wandering. Paths blurred together, anxiety grew, and every direction felt wrong. At last, they came upon an old hermit sitting quietly beside a clearing. His weathered face and calm presence brought immediate relief. "How do we return to the world?" they asked urgently. The hermit looked at them with kind, seeing eyes. "I could tell you," he said gently, "but you would still lose your way." Confused and frustrated, they asked, "Then what should we do?" The hermit smiled and pointed to a small stream flowing through the grass. "Go with the flow," he said softly. And there, beside the murmuring water, the deeper lesson began to unfold. You notice that stream nearby? Simply stay with it. Small waters join larger ones, creeks become rivers, and rivers eventually pass through villages and towns. Along the way, you will find water to drink and fruit growing near the banks. The advice was grounded and immediately reassuring. For those who are lost, following water downstream has always been a trustworthy way back toward human life, while also providing what is needed to endure the journey. Yet one of the men, sensing there was more beneath the surface, asked quietly, "Is this what people mean when they speak of going with the flow?" The hermit paused, letting the sound of moving water answer first. "Yes," he said softly, "and also no." With that, he turned and continued along his path, leaving the travelers alone with the meaning still unfolding. The Buddha once taught, "When you understand, things are just as they are. When you do not understand, things are just as they are." This simple statement reflects the layered wisdom present in the hermit's reply. True guidance often speaks on more than one level at the same time. On the surface, the instruction was practical survival knowledge. At a deeper level, it reflected the way Zen invites us to live. Why did the hermit say they would still become lost if he merely gave directions? Because information alone does not create wisdom. Directions can help for a moment, but they do not awaken the inner sense of orientation. Wisdom grows when we learn to read the landscape of life for ourselves and feel the quiet current beneath events. This is how many of us approach spiritual teachings. We ask for instructions. Tell me what to do. Give me the method that will end my confusion. Yet true guidance does not hand us a finished map. It teaches us how to sense the terrain beneath our feet. Like the stream that does not need instructions to reach the sea, we carry an inherent intelligence within us. When we learn to trust it, it naturally leads us where we need to go. The phrase, "go with the flow," is often misunderstood as drifting without care. But the hermit's answer points towards something far more subtle. True flowing is not passivity. It is alignment. It is moving with the natural rhythm of wisdom and compassion rather than against it. The stream symbolizes the underlying way of things, the quiet order that exists beneath all forms. When we move in harmony with it, effort softens. Resistance eases. Life becomes less of a struggle and more of a conversation. This kind of intelligence cannot be forced through planning alone. The rational mind wants certainty, steps, guarantees. But the deeper knowing operates through presence. It listens moment by moment. The stream does not know the ocean. It only knows the next bend. And that is enough. When we cultivate awareness in the present, we sense the right response without needing to control the entire future. Tonight, as you reflect on your own path, notice the quiet currents beneath your concerns. What might happen if you trusted them a little more? If you allowed yourself to move gently, while still caring for what is necessary? The Buddha said, "From one flame, thousands of candles may be lit, and the flame is not diminished." The hermit's words were such a flame, offering not answers, but a way of seeing that could guide countless moments ahead. Now, let us turn toward a teaching on impermanence and the temporary nature of all roles and possessions. This is the story of the inn that believed it was a palace. Long ago, in ancient India, a respected teacher wandered from village to village, sharing the Buddha's path with anyone willing to listen. His kindness and clarity became widely known, reaching even royal courts. One day, he arrived in the capital of a powerful kingdom. Above the busy streets rose a magnificent palace, shining like a jewel beneath the sun. Its marble walls were set with precious stones. Gardens bloomed with rare flowers. Fountains whispered endlessly. Guards stood in polished armor, motionless and alert. It was clearly a place of great wealth and authority. The teacher approached with the same calm humility he offered everywhere. The guards, recognizing his presence, stepped aside without question. He walked through halls draped in silk, past statues of gold, until he reached the throne room. There, the king sat elevated above the floor, surrounded by courtiers adorned in jewels. The king looked up, measuring the visitor before him. "What do you seek?" he asked, his voice accustomed to obedience. The teacher bowed gently. "Your Majesty," he said, "I am looking for a place to sleep for the night. This inn will do." A ripple of surprise passed through the court. The king frowned slightly. "This is no inn," he replied. "This is my palace. I rule this land as my ancestors did before me." The teacher nodded, as if receiving new information. "May I ask," he said calmly, "who lived here before you?" "My father," the king answered. "He ruled from this palace for many years before he passed away." The teacher remained silent, allowing the question to deepen in the stillness. "Yes," the teacher said with quiet curiosity, "and before him, who lived here?" "My grandfather," the king replied, now aware of the direction these questions were taking. "He ruled from this throne as well. And he too has passed away." The teacher became still, allowing the weight of these words to rest in the spacious hall. The courtiers fell silent, sensing something deeper unfolding beyond ordinary conversation. Even the king remained motionless, waiting, almost unconsciously, for what would come next. At last, the teacher spoke, his voice gentle yet unmistakably clear, filling the ornate room without effort. "So this place," he said softly, "where people stay for a short while and then depart. Did I misunderstand when you said it was not an inn?" The silence that followed was complete. The king sat unmoving, the question reaching places within him he had never examined. The courtiers stood frozen, witnessing something that had nothing to do with power or protocol. The Buddha taught, all conditioned things are impermanent. Strive on with awareness. This truth reveals itself in the teacher's simple question about a palace that calls itself permanent. Why do we cling so tightly to things that cannot remain? Zen wisdom reminds us that suffering arises when we resist impermanence. Everything we claim as mine, our possessions, our status, even our sense of self, is held only for a time. Look gently at your own life. The home you live in, the name on your work badge, the numbers you check and measure, all are temporary arrangements. Others held them before you. Others will hold them after. This does not ask us to abandon responsibility or neglect care. It invites us to hold everything more lightly, with awareness rather than grasping. The king's palace served important purposes, yet it was still beautiful, powerful, and temporary. When we forget this, identification with roles begins to create fear. Parent, professional, student. We try to preserve what cannot stay unchanged. But life moves. The worker becomes retired. The student becomes teacher. Strength fades and returns in new forms. These are not failures. They are expressions of change. A Vietnamese Zen master once said, "Because of impermanence, everything is possible." What seems limiting today can transform tomorrow. Pain can soften. Hearts can open. Patterns can loosen. Non-attachment does not mean coldness. It means caring deeply without clinging, loving fully without demanding permanence. We are all guests in this inn of existence, borrowing rooms, borrowing roles, returning them in time. This realization can feel unsettling or deeply freeing. The Buddha reminded us that since all is impermanent, we should use our time wisely. Not clinging, but cultivating kindness, clarity, and compassion while we are here. Tonight, as you rest among your own temporary belongings, can you feel the freedom in knowing you do not have to hold them forever? Can this awareness deepen your gratitude rather than diminish it? By remembering the briefness of our stay, each moment becomes more precious. And now, we turn toward a teaching about paradox and truth. This is the story of the hermit and the contradictory lesson. A well-known Zen master once attracted students from many regions. People traveled great distances, hoping to hear the insight that would awaken them. Among all his teachings, there was one he emphasized often. Buddha is your own mind, he would say. Stop searching elsewhere. What you seek is already present. One young monk was profoundly moved by these words. They felt complete, revolutionary, as if everything finally made sense. Believing he had received the highest truth, the monk withdrew into the wilderness. He found a remote cave and devoted himself entirely to contemplation. For 20 years, he lived in silence, meditating, examining the nature of mind, seeking to embody the teaching fully. Then one day, another monk passed nearby. The hermit emerged, joyful to meet a fellow practitioner. They spoke, and the traveler revealed he had studied under the same master. Eagerly, the hermit asked, "Tell me, what is our teacher's greatest teaching?" The traveler smiled brightly. Yes," he said. "He is very clear on this. His highest teaching is, Buddha is not your mind." The words struck like thunder. After 20 years of practice, the hermit stood speechless. The Buddha taught that the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. Here we see why. Teachings are tools, not possessions. Even the deepest truths are meant to release us, not bind us. Zen masters often use contradiction deliberately, not to confuse, but to prevent fixation. One teaching turns us inward, another dissolves attachment to that inward turn. Both serve. Neither is final. When we cling to teachings, they harden. When held lightly, they remain alive. The wise abandon their thoughts, not their perceptions. Truth cannot be captured by words. It is recognized directly. Now reflect gently. Where might you be holding insight too tightly? Can your understanding remain flexible, breathing, open? Tonight, allow all teachings to rest. Let them soften into silence. And now we come to a final reminder. This is the story of the meditation student and the simple truth. A young student practiced diligently each day. Yet recently his mind felt restless. His body ached. Nothing seemed right. Frustrated, he went to his teacher. "My meditation is terrible," he confessed. "I can't focus. I'm distracted. Everything feels wrong." The teacher looked at him calmly and said, "It will pass." Nothing more. Days later, the student noticed the storm settling. Discomfort eased. Clarity returned. He went back to the teacher, joyful this time. "My meditation is wonderful," he exclaimed. The teacher smiled gently and replied, "It will pass." And in that moment, the student understood. Everything flows. Nothing stays. Peace is found not in holding but in allowing. As you drift toward sleep tonight, let everything be just as it is. Thoughts arise. They pass. Breath moves. It passes. Nothing to fix. Nothing to grasp. Only rest. "Teacher," the student said with bright excitement, "my meditation feels wonderful now. I feel aware, peaceful, vividly alive. My mind is clear, my body is at ease, and each sitting seems filled with beauty. Everything about my practice feels perfect." The teacher paused in his sweeping. He lifted his eyes and looked at the student with the same quiet expression he had worn days before. Then, with the same gentle voice, he said again, "It will pass." This time, the student truly heard it. The joy he felt did not collapse into disappointment. Instead, it softened into understanding. He realized the teacher was not speaking about meditation alone, but about the nature of all experience. Buddha's wisdom reminds us, this too will pass. At the heart of this teaching is the truth of impermanence. Not only pain fades, but pleasure fades as well. Not only confusion dissolves, but clarity dissolves too. Why do we suffer so deeply as experience changes? Zen teaching tells us that much of our suffering comes from resisting impermanence. We cling tightly to pleasant states, and we push fiercely against unpleasant ones. In both directions, we exhaust ourselves, trying to control what cannot be controlled. The student's meditation, when it felt terrible and when it felt beautiful, was always temporary. The teacher's repeated words pointed to something deeper than changing states. They pointed to a quiet stability beneath them all. Not the stability of perfect conditions, but the stability of awareness itself. The open space in which every condition appears and disappears. Now, reflect gently on your own life. How much energy do you spend trying to preserve good moods, successful periods, or comfortable circumstances? How much resistance arises when emotions grow heavy, when situations feel uncertain, when discomfort appears? Both grasping and resisting create unnecessary strain. In Zen practice, we cultivate equanimity, a steady heart that can meet change without collapse. This does not mean indifference. It does not mean we stop caring. It means learning to remain centered, whether experience feels pleasant or unpleasant, whether life feels smooth or difficult. The words, "it will pass," carry both comfort and challenge. They comfort us in pain, reminding us that suffering does not last forever. They challenge us in joy, preventing us from building identity around temporary success or peak experience. A Zen teacher once said, "You are perfect as you are, and there is still room to grow." This paradox points to the same truth. We can fully inhabit this moment, while holding it lightly, knowing it will change. Look honestly at your own patterns. Where are you trying to freeze what is fluid? Where are you fighting conditions that would shift naturally if you allowed them to move on their own? The Buddha taught, all conditioned things are impermanent. Practice with diligence. This invites us to engage life wholeheartedly while releasing our grip on outcomes. We can love deeply, practice sincerely, and grow patiently, while remembering that every experience is a visitor, not a possession. This understanding changes everything. Success no longer intoxicates us. Failure no longer defines us. Pleasure no longer traps us. Pain no longer destroys us. We find steadiness not in controlling life, but in resting as the awareness that remains while life moves. Tonight, whatever you are feeling, comfort or discomfort, clarity or confusion, can you remember the teacher's quiet wisdom? Can you fully allow this moment while knowing it will pass? As the Buddha observed, just as the ocean has one taste, salt, so this teaching has one taste, liberation. Liberation is not found in permanent bliss, but in the freedom to move gently with change. Now we turn to a teaching about freedom beyond birth and death. In a quiet monastery garden, where cherry blossoms drifted on the spring air, a devoted student named Gashu approached his teacher, Yi. For many years, Gashu had practiced faithfully. He studied texts, followed instructions, and sat in meditation day after day. Yet he felt no closer to awakening. He bowed deeply, his face marked by effort and longing. "Master," he said, "I have practiced for many years. I follow every instruction. Still, I feel no freer than before. What am I missing? What more must I do?" You looked at him with compassion, seeing how striving itself had become Gashu's burden. "There is no secret," Ye said quietly. "It is simply freedom from birth and death." Gashu frowned in confusion. "How can that be?" he asked. "If I cannot even quiet my mind, how can I pass beyond birth and death?" Yu's eyes suddenly shone. He raised his voice and said, "Every passing thought is birth and death." At that moment, something broke open. Gashu saw that what he sought as a distant achievement was already happening, here and now. Thoughts arising, thoughts fading, sensations appearing, sensations dissolving. This endless flow was not bondage. It was freedom itself. A great weight fell away. Years of striving evaporated. He realized he had never been trapped, only misidentified. He was not the thoughts. He was the awareness in which thoughts appeared. The Buddha taught, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Suffering arises not because we lack freedom, but because we overlook it. We mistake ourselves for the stream of experience instead of the space that allows the stream to flow. Every thought is born. Every thought dies. Every emotion rises and falls. This is not a problem to fix. It is the movement of life. When we identify with the movement, we feel fear. When we recognize the space, we find peace. A Zen master once said, "Ordinary mind is the way." Awakening is not hidden in special states, but in the awareness that knows all states equally. Tonight, as thoughts come and go, can you notice this quiet knowing? You are not what passes. You are what remains. And now, we turn gently to a final story, the story of the wishing tree. A poor man wandered slowly through a dense forest. His shoulders were heavy with unpaid debts, strained relationships, and dreams long delayed. Though sunlight filtered softly through the leaves, he noticed none of it. His mind spun endlessly with worry upon worry. Exhausted, he leaned against a broad tree trunk. Its bark felt cool and steady. "I wish I had something to drink," he whispered. And in that instant, a cup of clear, cool water appeared in his hand. He stared at it in disbelief, turning it slowly, wondering what kind of miracle he had stumbled into. Carefully, almost hesitantly, he lifted the cup to his lips and drank. The water was astonishing, gently sweet. It soothed his dry throat and seemed to flow through his entire body, as if easing a long-held tension he had forgotten he carried. "That is strange," he murmured softly. At that moment, his stomach rumbled with hunger. Without planning to, without effort, a quiet wish formed within him. "I could eat something." Before him appeared a simple meal, resting on a plain wooden plate. Fresh bread, ripe fruit, vegetables still glowing with the life of the earth, as though they had been gathered only moments ago. A warm, gentle aroma filled the air. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, marveling at the quiet perfection of it. "My wishes are being answered," he whispered, his voice trembling with awe. A ripple of excitement passed through him. His heart beat faster now, his thoughts racing ahead. "Well then," he said softly, "if this is so, I wish for a home." Beyond the tree, in the open meadow, a house slowly appeared. It was beautiful. Light poured through wide windows. Rooms felt spacious and calm. Furniture was simple yet comforting. Gardens bloomed gently around it, flowers swaying as if welcoming him. Joy surged within his chest. He rose and walked toward it, his feet barely touching the ground. "If I have a house," he thought, "I will need help to care for it." As the thought formed, kind-faced figures appeared nearby. They bowed respectfully, their presence calm and sincere, asking how they might serve. The man laughed aloud, unable to contain his delight. "And what is a home?" he said thoughtfully, "without someone to share it with?" He wished for a companion, someone kind, loving, and wise. Beside him appeared a woman, radiant and gentle. Her eyes held warmth. Her smile carried quiet understanding. As she reached for his hand, something shifted within him. A familiar voice rose in his mind, the voice that had followed him all his life. "Wait," he said suddenly, pulling away. "This is impossible. People like me are not this fortunate. Things like this do not happen to me. This cannot be real." As the words settled into the air, everything began to dissolve. The woman faded first. Then the servants. The house softened into light and disappeared. Even the memory of the meal slipped quietly away. He stood alone again, leaning against what now seemed like an ordinary tree. Only his worries remained. "I knew it," he muttered, turning away and walking deeper into the forest, his thoughts returning effortlessly to their familiar rhythm of doubt and complaint. The Buddha reminds us, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we shape our world. At the heart of this teaching lies the creative power of belief and the quiet destruction caused by doubt. Why do we so easily dismiss the good that enters our lives? Zen teachings point to a deeply conditioned habit. We trust our limitations more than our possibilities. We become so accustomed to struggle that ease feels unfamiliar, so identified with lack that abundance feels unsafe. Notice how often kindness appears, beauty reveals itself, or opportunity quietly opens, only to be dismissed as coincidence, luck, or something meant for someone else. This reflexive doubt causes us to walk away from the very gifts we have been seeking. The wishing tree symbolizes a responsive universe, one that reflects back our deepest beliefs about what is possible and what we deserve. When we meet life with openness, resources appear. When we meet life with suspicion, those same possibilities vanish from view. The man beneath the tree lacked nothing, but his belief in limitation overpowered his direct experience. This is the quiet tragedy of self-doubt. It causes us to abandon the solutions already present. Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi said, "You are perfect as you are, and you could use a little improvement." This gentle paradox holds balance. Worthiness and growth existing together. The man could not hold both. He could not believe he deserved goodness and that change was possible. In our lives today, wishing trees appear often. A sincere friendship we question. An opportunity we reject. A love we sabotage because it feels too fragile to trust. Each time we choose familiar limitation over unfamiliar possibility, we walk away from our own tree. The Buddha taught, doubt everything. Find your own light. Yet there is a difference between wise doubt and self-defeating doubt. Wise doubt seeks clarity. Self-defeating doubt assumes unworthiness. Zen practice invites us to notice these moments gently. Tonight, as the day settles, can you remember moments when you turned away from joy, from generosity, from goodness, because it felt undeserved? What would it mean to trust your worthiness? The Buddha observed, thousands of candles may be lit from a single flame, and the flame is not diminished. Receiving does not lessen us. It expands us. Now, let us turn softly to another teaching, a story about seeking and finding. This is the discovery of the master sculptor. In a vast stone quarry beneath towering mountains, a sculptor moved slowly among marble blocks, his hands weathered by decades of devotion. The morning sun bathed the stone in gold. Each block seemed to breathe quietly before him. "There," he would say softly, "there is a hero within this stone, and a saint waiting in that one." His gift was seen beyond form, recognizing the true nature already present. Yet today, his heart was heavy. For more than 40 years, he had searched for one stone, the perfect block from which to carve his final work, a statue of the Buddha. He had traveled far, consulted experts, searched the greatest quarries. Still, the stone he sought remained unseen. His strength was fading now, and the Buddha block seemed forever hidden. Carrying the quiet weight of a lifetime of searching, The sculptor sought comfort from a local Zen priest who tended a small temple at the end of the narrow street where he lived. The temple was humble and still. A simple courtyard opened to the sky, and at its center stood an old stone well, its edges softened by time, surrounded by moss carefully cared for. "Master," the sculptor said, bowing deeply, "I have searched for 40 years for the perfect stone from which to carve the Buddha. My life's work feels unfinished." The priest listened without interruption. His eyes were kind. After a moment he smiled gently. "No problem," he said. The words were so simple that the sculptor felt both puzzled and hopeful. "You mean," the sculptor asked carefully, "that you know where I might find the perfect stone to release the Buddha I have dreamed of?" "Of course," the priest replied calmly. "Where?" the sculptor asked, his voice rising with anticipation. The priest raised his hand and pointed quietly across the courtyard. "Over there," he said, indicating the stone well. The sculptor hurried forward and leaned over the edge. The water below was dark and still. And there, gazing back at him, were the same questioning eyes, the same lined face shaped by years of searching. His own reflection. The Buddha reminds us, if you cannot find the truth right where you are, where else do you expect to find it? The deeper teaching reveals that what we seek most desperately is rarely hidden in distant places or perfect conditions. It rests quietly in the very ground of our own being. Why do we exhaust ourselves searching everywhere except within? Zen wisdom shows us that we become so focused on what we seek that we forget to examine the one who is seeking. The sculptor had studied countless stones, traveled vast distances, yet never considered that the awareness doing the searching was itself the perfect material for awakening. Consider how often in your own life you postpone peace. "I will be content when conditions improve, when success arrives, when everything finally aligns." This is seeking the Buddha block everywhere except in the reflection looking back at us right now. Zen Master Huangbo taught, "Your ordinary mind, that is the way." The sculptor's realization was not that he needed to become someone else, but that he needed to recognize who he already was. The perfect material is not found in circumstances, but in the awareness that notices, creates, and longs. The well represents the still point of consciousness where seeking ends and finding begins. When we stop looking outward and peer gently into awareness itself, we discover that the seeker and the sought are not separate. Zen speaks of the original face, the nature that exists before habit and conditioning. This face is not hidden. It looks back at us from every quiet moment of genuine presence. Tonight, as you notice your own seeking mind, can you sense the Buddha nature that has always been here? Perhaps it appears as curiosity, as longing, or simply as the awareness receiving these words. As the Buddha taught, "Look within. You are the Buddha." The masterpiece you seek is not waiting for perfect material. It waits for recognition. The artist, the art, and the awareness that sees beauty are expressions of the same essential nature. Now, let us turn gently to another story, a teaching about patience and the paradox of urgency. This is the lesson of the one-eyed student. In a quiet valley lined with flowering cherry trees, a young man heard tales of a great Zen master whose students awakened through sincere practice. Filled with ambition and a burning desire to change his life, the young seeker traveled many days to reach the monastery. His mind was fixed on enlightenment, as though it were something to be seized quickly. When he arrived, dusty, tired, and bright with hope, He immediately requested an audience with the master. The teacher received him in a simple room overlooking a garden where monks moved slowly among plants, their gestures unhurried and calm. "Master," the young man said, bowing deeply, "I have come with total dedication. I will work harder than anyone before me. Tell me, if I practice with unwavering effort, how long will it take to find Zen?" The master sat silently for a time, observing the tension in the young man's shoulders, the urgency in his breath. Finally, he said, 10 years. The student's eyes widened. 10 years felt unbearably long when awakening seemed so urgent. "But master," he pressed, "what if I work very, very hard? Meditate longer, study more, practice intensely? How long then?" The master reflected briefly, then said, 20 years. The student's confusion deepened. "But master," he insisted, his voice tightening, "you don't understand. What if I devote every moment? Sleep little? Push beyond all limits? Surely then it will be faster." 30 years, the master replied gently. Now the student was agitated. Nothing made sense. "Why?" he asked. "Does greater effort make the journey longer?" The master's voice softened. "When you keep one eye on the goal," he said quietly, "you have only one eye on the path." Ancient wisdom tells us, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. This story reveals a deep truth about spiritual growth. Why does grasping for results slow awakening? First, it divides attention. When part of the mind is measuring progress, it cannot fully inhabit the present practice where insight unfolds. Second is what Zen calls the gaining mind, turning practice into a transaction. Meditating to get something, practicing to become someone. This creates a split between who we are and who we imagine we must be. The Buddha taught, what you are looking for is where you are looking from. Zen is not attained. It is recognized. Not a destination, but the awareness walking each step. Urgent seeking assumes that this moment is insufficient. Zen gently reminds us, nothing is missing. And with that understanding, the mind can finally rest. Yet Zen reminds us that the very mind that seeks is the same awareness it longs to discover. Look gently into your own experience of learning and growth. Have your deepest understandings not often appeared when you were not trying to understand at all? Perhaps while walking beneath trees, washing your hands in warm water, or sitting quietly without purpose. In these unplanned moments, clarity arrives on its own. This is what the master was pointing toward. Wisdom unfolds when attention is no longer divided between here and there, now and later. Zen master Huangbo taught, your everyday mind, that is the way. This teaching invites us to reflect on how we approach spiritual practice itself. Are we practicing to become someone else, or to recognize who we already are? Are we walking a path to reach a distant goal, or discovering that the path itself has never led away from home? The student's misunderstanding was not his longing for awakening, but his belief that awakening existed somewhere beyond this moment. Each time he tried harder, he unknowingly stepped further away from natural awareness. Like chasing one's own shadow, the faster we run, the more it slips away. In Zen, we cultivate what is called just sitting. Meditation without gain, without demand, without splitting attention between practice and outcome. This does not mean indifference or laziness. It means offering complete presence to each moment, allowing insight to arise naturally instead of being forced. Consider how this wisdom applies to daily life. In relationships, trying too hard to be loved often creates distance. In creative work, forcing inspiration tightens the flow, while relaxed attention allows it to emerge. Tonight, as your mind drifts toward imagined futures, who you hope to become, the peace you wish to find, the understanding you seek, can you remember the Master's words? Can you return both eyes to the path and discover that what you were seeking at the end has been present in every step? The Buddha spoke of this when he said, "There is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path." By walking with undivided attention, we realize that nothing was missing. Now let us turn to a story that reveals the deepest truth hidden in the most obvious place. This is the dialogue between Joshu and Nansen on the nature of ordinary mind. In a quiet mountain monastery, where morning mist drifted between ancient pine trees, two Zen masters sat together. Temple bells echoed softly through the valley, as generations of seekers before them had wrestled with the same essential question. Joshu, despite years of practice and insight, approached his teacher Nansen with sincere uncertainty. They sat facing one another in the meditation hall, a space worn smooth by devotion. "Master," Joshu asked plainly, "what is the way? With all these teachings and practices, what are we truly seeking?" Nansen answered without hesitation, "Ordinary mind is the way." The simplicity unsettled Joshu. He had expected something mystical, something removed from daily life. "If ordinary mind is the way," he asked, "should we then cultivate it? Make it our goal?" Nansen shook his head gently. "If you aim toward it," he said, "you immediately move away from it. The effort to attain ordinary mind turns it into something extraordinary, and it is no longer ordinary." Joshu felt trapped in confusion. "Then how can we know it?" he asked. "If we do not strive, how do we recognize the way at all?" Nansen's final words were clear and precise. "The way is not found in knowing or not knowing. Knowing turns it into an idea. Not knowing turns it into emptiness. When the way is realized without doubt, it is like vast open space, boundless, inclusive, without division." "At that point," he said softly, "how could there be right or wrong, ordinary or sacred?" In that moment, Joshu's seeking mind relaxed. Not because he found an answer, but because he recognized what had always been present. The Buddha reminds us, there is nothing to seek and nothing to gain. Everything is already here. The essence of this teaching is that awakening is not a special state, but the ordinary awareness reading these words right now. Why is this so difficult to accept? Because we are conditioned to believe that truth must be extraordinary, dramatic, mystical, distant. We imagine enlightenment as endless bliss, when in truth it is simply awareness free from grasping. Like searching frantically for glasses already resting on the face, we exhaust ourselves seeking what we already possess. Thoughts rise and fall. Sensations come and go. Sounds appear and fade. This effortless functioning of awareness is what Nansen called ordinary mind. It is already free because it is the space in which all experience unfolds. Huangbo taught again and again, "Your everyday mind, that is the way." Just this awareness. Thinking, feeling, perceiving. Nothing added, nothing removed. This ordinariness is why it is overlooked. We keep searching for something more impressive, But the vast openness Nansen described is not emptiness. It is spacious presence. Like the sky, unchanged by clouds or storms, awareness remains steady through joy and sorrow, clarity and confusion. This understanding transforms practice. Instead of striving upward, we settle inward. Instead of escaping the ordinary, we recognize its depth. The sound of rain becomes sacred. Washing dishes becomes meditation. In Japanese wisdom, this is called wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection, the grace of what simply is. Tonight, as you rest in awareness, aware of breath, of sound, of these words, can you recognize what you have been seeking? Can you release the effort to become anything other than this? As the Buddha taught, peace comes from within. Do not seek it outside. The way is not somewhere else. It is the ground on which you already rest. And in recognizing ordinary mind as Buddha mind, the journey gently dissolves into stillness. Now, let us move toward another story, a quiet lesson about wisdom hidden in plain sight. This is the tale of the visitor and the holy man. According to the old tales, he lived in a modest dwelling near the summit of a high mountain, far removed from the noise, temptations, and restless desires of village life below. His days were said to pass in quiet simplicity, untouched by worldly ambition. From the valley beneath that mountain came a man burdened by a problem that clung to him like a shadow. No solution had revealed itself, no matter how many paths he explored. He had spoken with friends, listened to village elders, and traveled to learn from other teachers, yet his heart remained unsettled, his mind restless and unresolved. When word reached him of a holy man dwelling alone upon the mountain, something deep within stirred. He felt certain that the answers he sought could only be found there. No distance felt too far, no hardship too great. And so he began the ascent. The trail was narrow and unforgiving. Stone cut into his feet as the sun burned overhead. His breath grew heavy, his muscles trembled, and his water slowly disappeared. Still he pressed onward. With every step, he repeated the belief that once he stood before this enlightened being, all confusion would dissolve, all suffering would be explained away by superior wisdom. After many exhausting hours, dusty and weary, he arrived at the summit. There stood a small, weather-worn house, humble and plain, exactly as one might expect for someone free from attachment. His heart quickened as he approached the door, filled with reverence and expectation. When he knocked, an elderly man answered. The servant was unremarkable in every way: simple clothing, quiet posture, an ordinary face softened by time. Nothing about him suggested greatness. The visitor barely looked at him. "I have come to see the holy man," he said, already peering past the servant, searching for signs of extraordinary presence. The old man smiled gently and invited him inside. With slow steps, he guided the visitor through the house. Room by room, the visitor scanned every corner, looking for sacred robes, mysterious objects, or some unmistakable sign of enlightenment. But all he saw were simple furnishings and everyday tools. Before he fully realized it, they had reached the back door. The servant opened it and gestured toward the descending path. Confusion flooded the visitor's face. "Wait," he said sharply. "I did not climb all this way to walk through an empty house. Where is the holy man?" The servant's smile deepened, warm and knowing. "You have already seen him," he replied softly. "And more than that, I have something to offer you that will resolve the burden you carry." The visitor stared, unable to accept what he was hearing. This ordinary servant could not possibly be the one spoken of in legends. The old man continued, his voice calm and steady. See every person you meet as a wise and holy being. When you learn to recognize the sacred in each encounter, the problem you brought here will naturally dissolve. The Buddha taught that if you wish to understand your past, look to your present condition, and if you wish to see your future, observe your present actions. This story reminds us that wisdom appears only to the eyes prepared to recognize it. Why do we search for truth in distant places, in dramatic figures, while overlooking the quiet wisdom surrounding us each day? Zen reveals how deeply we are conditioned to expect enlightenment to look impressive, rare, and extraordinary. Yet the most profound teachings often arrive through ordinary moments and unremarkable people. The visitor's true difficulty was not the problem he named, but his inability to see beyond expectation. He searched so intently for a holy appearance that he nearly missed holiness itself. Reflect gently on your own encounters. The cashier who smiles sincerely, the worker who performs their task with dignity, the child who speaks with innocent clarity. Any one of them may carry the insight you need. When we stop searching for wisdom elsewhere and begin meeting each person as a potential teacher, the world quietly transforms. Even those who challenge us become mirrors for understanding. Dogen taught that to study the Buddha way is to study the self, and to study the self is to forget the self. When ego loosens its grip, wisdom appears everywhere. Now, let us drift into another Zen story, one that speaks of seeking and finding. In the peaceful mountains near Lake Hakone stood a monastery known for deep discipline. Among its monks lived a quiet man named Ichi. For 55 years, he worked in the kitchen. While others meditated or debated scripture, Ichi washed rice, chopped vegetables, and tended fires with patient care. Yet he carried a burden. He had been given a koan long ago. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Year after year, he struggled to understand it. As time passed, others advanced while he remained unchanged. Doubt grew heavy in his heart. As age weakened his body, Ichi was moved to a small attic room. Lying there in the dim light of his final days, something softened. The striving faded. The need to achieve dissolved. In that gentle stillness, peace arose, not as triumph, but as rest. In silence beyond effort, beyond thought, Ichi finally heard it. Not a sound, but the vast presence beneath all sound. The answer had never been absent. Only the seeking had obscured it. The Buddha said, "Cease clinging to opinions, and awakening appears." Enlightenment is not gained through effort, but revealed when effort ends. So often, we complicate what is already whole. We search for happiness, covering joy. We pursue wisdom, hiding understanding. The sound of one hand clapping is not solved. It is listened to. As you rest now, consider this gently. What if the awareness noticing your search is already what you seek? Peace comes from within. Do not look outside. Now we turn to a final story, the blind man and his lantern. One evening, a blind man prepared to walk home through dark village streets. His friend offered him a lantern, not so he could see, but so others could see him. He accepted gratefully. But the candle soon went out, unnoticed. Carrying an unlit lantern, he collided with another traveler. "Why didn't you see my light?" he protested. "My friend," the traveler replied softly, "your lantern is dark." This teaches us the difference between carrying symbols of wisdom and embodying wisdom itself. Books, teachings, and practices are lanterns, but only lived awareness is light. Without the flame of experience, we walk in darkness believing we are illuminated. Zen reminds us of the difference between knowing about and knowing directly. As your breathing slows now, allow these stories to settle like leaves on still water. Nothing more is needed. Listen, and let the silence carry you gently into sleep. You may read every book ever written about the sweetness of an apple, memorize descriptions of its flavor and texture, understand its chemistry and history, yet until you slowly bite into one, that knowledge remains distant and borrowed. In the same way, we can gather endless ideas about peace, kindness, or wisdom without ever allowing these qualities to live within us. Understanding without experience remains incomplete. The blind man carried sincere intentions. He wished to protect others, to move through the world with care and responsibility. Yet good intentions alone could not replace the simple necessity of a living flame. An unlit candle, no matter how beautifully housed, cannot guide anyone through darkness. This is the quiet challenge of spiritual life. Not wishing to be wise, not appearing wise, but allowing wisdom to arise through direct, lived awareness. Zen reminds us that the Buddha way is discovered through intimate knowing. To study the self is to observe deeply, and to forget the self is to release the need to protect an image of who we think we are. The lantern symbolizes the identity we carry, the idea that we are insightful, awakened, or spiritually mature. When our attention becomes fixed on maintaining that identity, the inner flame often fades unnoticed. The traveler who pointed out the dark lantern was not acting with cruelty. Sometimes truth arrives through gentle collision. Others help us see what we have stopped noticing in ourselves. There are moments when we all carry an unlit lantern, when we offer advice we have not yet embodied, when we speak calmly while tension churns beneath our words, when we present certainty while quietly wrestling with doubt. These are not failures. They are invitations. To notice the darkness is already the beginning of light. The lantern itself is not the problem. It simply waits for what gives it purpose. In life, we often build the outer shapes of understanding, roles, skills, language, routines, while drifting away from the living presence that once inspired them. The guide who no longer listens, the teacher who stops learning, the practitioner whose practice hardens into habit. Each carries a lantern, waiting to be relit. The Buddha taught that a single genuine moment of presence illuminates more than countless empty words. A small flame offers more guidance than the most ornate vessel without light. Zen practice gently asks us to look again. Is the candle burning now? Are we responding from awareness or from memory? From openness or from habit? From warmth or from appearance? Candles naturally flicker. Wind blows. Wax melts. The light fades. This is not a mistake. The practice lies in noticing, in humility, in lighting the flame again rather than pretending it never went out. Tonight, as your body grows heavier and your breath softens, consider the lanterns you carry. Which ones glow with lived understanding? Which ones wait quietly in the dark? Can you see them without judgment, simply as places where warmth may return? The Buddha reminded us that truth cannot remain hidden forever. Like the sun and the moon, it eventually reveals itself. Rather than waiting for painful collisions to show us where light is missing, we can tend our inner flame with care, knowing that when it shines, it naturally guides both ourselves and those around us. Now, let us drift into another teaching, one about acceptance, natural rhythm, and the deeper meaning of prosperity. There once lived a wealthy merchant whose fortune had grown through decades of careful trade and sharp judgment. His family owned land, commanded influence, and lived surrounded by comfort. As age settled into his bones, his thoughts turned increasingly toward the future. He wished to secure lasting prosperity for generations yet to come. Hearing of a Zen master renowned for insight beyond ordinary understanding, the merchant approached him with a request. Bowing respectfully, adorned in fine garments, he asked for a blessing, something written that would protect his family's happiness long after his own life ended. The master listened in silence. After a moment, he prepared his brush and paper. The merchant watched with eager anticipation, imagining elegant wisdom, powerful words to guard wealth and success. With calm simplicity, the master wrote 7 words. Father dies. Son dies. Grandson dies. The merchant's face burned with anger and confusion. This was not what he had asked for. He saw only misfortune and darkness in those words. His voice rose as he demanded an explanation. The master met his gaze with steady compassion. He asked the merchant to consider carefully. If a child were to die before a parent, the grief would tear the family apart. If a grandson were taken before his father, the suffering would ripple across generations. But if life unfolds in the natural order, each generation living fully before passing on, this represents harmony, not tragedy. It is the path of least suffering. It is true prosperity. Impermanence, the Buddha taught, is sacred. This teaching reveals a wisdom deeper than wealth. Much of our pain arises from resisting what cannot be changed. Zen invites us not to escape impermanence, but to live gently within it. The merchant believed prosperity meant accumulation, what could be owned, protected, passed down. The master pointed to another inheritance, the blessing of a family that moves through life and death in alignment with nature rather than against it. When we see death not as failure but as completion, something in us softens. The blessing was not morbid. It was compassionate. It wished each generation the gift of time. Time to live, to love, and to step aside when the moment arrives. So often we try to control the future through possessions and plans. Yet true security arises from acceptance, not control. The Buddha reminded us that all conditioned things pass away. Understanding this does not weaken our efforts, it gives them meaning. As you rest now, reflect gently on what you wish for those you love. Is it endless preservation, or the wisdom to meet life's changes with grace? The Master's words reveal a quiet truth. The opposite of natural order is not immortality, but suffering. By blessing the ordinary sequence of life, he wished freedom from the deepest sorrow. Tonight, allow this understanding to settle softly. True prosperity does not lie in escaping life's rhythm, but in moving with it, like a leaf drifting on still water. And now, let us continue onward toward a final teaching, one that explores the subtle distance between knowing something in thought and knowing it in being. This is the story of the one-eyed monk and the silent exchange. Long ago in China, when wandering monks traveled from monastery to monastery in search of understanding, a quiet tradition was observed among Zen communities. Before a traveler could rest for the night, He was invited into a brief encounter known as Dharma exchange. This was not a debate of words, nor a contest to win or lose, but a meeting where insight revealed itself through gesture, presence, and response. At a monastery hidden among tall bamboo groves, a weary monk arrived as evening light softened into shadow. Dust clung to his robes, and his sandals bore the marks of many roads. Yet his gaze was clear, attentive, alive with the longing to see more deeply. The abbot, occupied with the evening routine, asked his longtime attendant to receive the visitor. This attendant had served quietly for many years. In his youth, he had lost one eye in an accident. Yet rather than narrowing his vision, this loss had deepened something inward, sharpening his awareness beyond appearances. When the two met in the reception hall, the traveler suggested something unusual. "Let us speak without words," he proposed, signaling that their exchange would unfold through gesture alone. Some truths, he felt, lived beyond language. The attendant agreed. The traveler lifted one finger toward the open space between them, holding it calmly. Without pause, the attendant raised two fingers in response. The traveler then lifted three. At this, the attendant slowly closed his hand into a firm fist and held it still. The traveler froze. His confidence wavered. After a moment, he bowed deeply and withdrew, saying nothing more. Soon after, he approached the abbot with humility. "Venerable one," he said, "your representative possesses insight far beyond my own. I am not ready to remain here and must continue my journey." Curious, the abbot asked him to explain. The traveler spoke sincerely. "I raised one finger to symbolize the awakened one." Your monk answered with two, representing the teaching itself. "I then raised three for the complete jewel of awakening, teaching, and community." When he formed a fist, I understood that all these are ultimately one. His realization surpasses mine. The abbot listened in silence. Not long after, the attendant rushed in, breath quick, his single eye bright with agitation. "Where is that rude fellow?" he demanded. "I have never been insulted so openly." The abbot, now truly intrigued, asked him what he had experienced. The attendant spoke heatedly. "First, he mocked my missing eye by holding up one finger. I remained polite and lifted two, acknowledging his good fortune. Then he raised three, reminding me that together we had only three eyes between us. That was enough. I clenched my fist, ready to strike, and he fled like a coward." The abbot stood quietly, witnessing how the same moment had unfolded into two entirely different worlds. The Buddha taught that we do not see things as they are, but as we are. Both monks were sincere. Both were mistaken. Each filtered reality through his own conditioning. One through old wounds, the other through spiritual expectation. Zen teaches that the winds of praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, quietly shape our inner weather. When these winds blow strongly, perception bends with them. The attendant's past sensitivity colored every gesture. The traveler's hunger for meaning transformed anger into wisdom. Look gently into your own life. How often do your fears, hopes, or old stories speak louder than what is actually happening? A distracted silence becomes rejection. A suggestion feels like criticism. A neutral glance becomes judgment. Zen invites us into don't know mind, a soft openness that resists quick conclusions. It asks us to notice emotion as it arises, before it hardens into certainty. The Buddha taught that hatred cannot be healed by hatred, only by understanding. If either monk had paused, just for a breath, their meeting might have become a true teaching for both. Tonight, as memories of your day drift through awareness, notice where meaning was added, where interpretation replaced presence. Peace does not come from controlling the world, but from seeing clearly how the mind creates it. Now, let us continue with a story of freedom that arises not from approval, but from the heart itself. In a quiet monastery garden, petals falling like soft snow, a student sat beside his teacher beneath an old maple tree. Twilight wrapped the air in stillness. The student spoke gently. "When I was young, I longed for my family to be proud of me. I wanted to succeed so they would love me more. Were you ever the same?" The master nodded. "Very much so." "Why did you want it so deeply?" the student asked. The master smiled softly. "I believed their pride would give me permission to accept myself. I thought love had to be earned. Their approval would prove my worth." After a pause, he continued. "One day, I asked a different question. What if I no longer needed permission? What if love could arise from within?" The garden seemed to breathe with them. "That question marked the true beginning of my path," the master said. "Not seeking completion elsewhere, but recognizing what was already whole." "Did the desire for approval disappear?" the student asked. The master laughed quietly. "The habit remained, but it lost its power. I learned to watch it pass, like fireflies appearing at dusk. I could see them without chasing their light." "So you still cared what others thought?" "I respected them," the master replied. "But I no longer depended on them. Their opinions became weather, changing, passing, no longer defining my peace." And the night settled deeper, holding these words gently, as breath slowed and listening softened. The master's face softened with a quiet, luminous joy. Never before had I felt such freedom as in that moment of release. It was as if unseen chains, carried silently for many years, loosened and fell away on their own. Nothing dramatic happened, and yet everything changed. The love I had spent so long searching for beyond myself was revealed to have been present within me all along, steady and unchanged. The Buddha reminds us that if we truly loved ourselves, we would not harm ourselves with harsh thoughts, unkind choices, or destructive habits. This realization touched the very center of the Master's awakening. Much of human suffering grows from the mistaken belief that we must earn the right to care for ourselves. We imagine love as a prize granted only after achievement, approval, or success. Yet here, something quietly revolutionary is revealed. Self-love is not a reward. It is our natural inheritance. We are complete not because of what we do, but because we are. From the moment we exist, worth is already present. Why, then, does unconditional self-acceptance feel so difficult? From early life, many of us learn that love is conditional. We are praised when we perform well and corrected when we fail. Slowly, we absorb the belief that affection must be deserved. Over time, we turn this same measuring gaze inward. These patterns become familiar, even comfortable, though they quietly limit us. A culture that equates happiness with achievement reinforces the illusion that we are lacking. Messages whisper that fulfillment lies somewhere ahead, somewhere else. Notice how much energy is spent managing impressions. How often does the mind adjust its expression to gain approval? How often does self-worth rise and fall with praise or criticism? When love arises from within, something essential settles. We can enjoy kindness without clinging to it. We can hear criticism without collapse. The ground beneath us remains steady. The Buddha taught that if one searched the entire universe, no being more deserving of love than oneself could be found. This is not selfishness. It is recognition of truth. Consciousness itself is worthy of care. Tonight, resting quietly, sense the awareness that is receiving these words. This presence does not improve or diminish. It remains open, like the sky, unchanged by passing weather. What would it be like to treat this awareness with gentleness? To offer yourself the same patience you would give a child learning to walk, or the same compassion you would extend to a dear friend in pain? Hatred cannot be healed by hatred. The Buddha taught this plainly. Self-judgment is not softened by more judgment. Only kindness dissolves tension. Only acceptance allows real transformation. In discovering this quiet love within, we find that the freedom we sought through others was always here, beating calmly in the heart. Now, as this journey of ancient wisdom gently comes to rest, notice that the peace you feel has not been added from outside. It has been remembered. These Zen stories have not given you something new. They have simply opened doors that were never locked. The Buddha taught that a single flame can light countless others without being diminished. Peace multiplies when it is shared. Each story has kindled a small, steady light. Together, they have guided you toward a simple truth. Tranquility does not come from perfect conditions, but from meeting whatever arises with openness. As sleep approaches, feel how naturally these teachings settle within you, like familiar companions returning home. This peace is not fragile. It is the same quiet stability cultivated by practitioners across centuries. Even as the mind drifts toward rest, the wisdom continues its gentle work, weaving itself into deeper layers of knowing. Awakening does not always arrive with thunder. Often, it comes as a soft recognition of what was never lost. As you fall asleep, notice how peace flows effortlessly when effort releases. This journey has not been entertainment alone. It has been a return to stillness. May this calm presence remain with you, deepening each time you pause and breathe. May these teachings continue to unfold quietly within your dreams. And may the gentle wisdom of Zen guide you into restful, healing sleep. Sleep well.